The air hung thick with the scent of laurel and something else, something ancient, primal. A low, guttural moan escaped the priestess's lips, her body convulsing on the tripod, eyes rolling back into an unnerving white. You stand among the hushed supplicants, a tremor of fear and awe seizing your heart as the sacred vapor rises from the chasm, filling the chamber, filling her. This was Delphi, the navel of the world, where the gods spoke, not through thunder, but through the tortured voice of a woman. Her words, fragmented and veiled, held the fate of kings, the destiny of empires, and the very fabric of the known world. For centuries, across the sun-baked hills and shadowed valleys of ancient Greece, priests and oracles served as the fragile, terrifying bridges between mortal ambition and divine will, their lives a strange tapestry woven with reverence, power, sacrifice, and an isolation that transcended the human. Imagine a life, simple and unadorned, suddenly shattered by the whispers of the divine. This was the fate of a young woman, perhaps named Thea, chosen from the villages surrounding the sacred slopes of Mount Parnassus to become a Pythia, an oracle of Apollo at Delphi. Her days, once filled with the rhythmic tasks of a shepherdess, the laughter of kin, the quiet contemplation of the changing seasons, were abruptly, brutally redefined. The selection process itself was shrouded in a terrifying mystique, not a prize to be sought, but a burden to be borne. It was said that the god himself, through signs or the pronouncements of the male priests, singled out a virgin, a woman untouched by the world, pure enough to serve as his earthly vessel. For Thea, the news arrived like a thunderclap, a divine decree that stole her breath and painted her future in hues of both terrifying glory and profound sorrow. You too might have felt that dread, that overwhelming sense of fate closing in, sealing you off from all you knew and loved. Her journey to Delphi's sacred precinct was not a celebratory procession, but a solemn, almost funereal march. Each step away from her familiar home was a step deeper into an unknown wilderness, a spiritual chasm. The majestic temples, gleaming marble in the fierce Greek sun, did not offer comfort but rather amplified her fear. They were monuments to a power so immense, so indifferent to individual human suffering, that she felt reduced to a mere speck, an insignificant instrument in a cosmic symphony. The older priestesses, their faces etched with years of divine service, offered cryptic smiles and knowing glances that spoke of a shared, unspoken burden. They were both mentors and silent warnings, living testaments to the Pythia's strange, isolated existence. Her initial training was a stark blend of the mundane and the sacred. She learned the intricate rituals of purification, the sacred baths in the Castalian spring, its icy waters a shock to the senses, meant to cleanse not just the body but the very essence of her being. She memorized ancient hymns, their words flowing like liquid gold, tales of Apollo's power and his divine wrath. She was taught the significance of the laurel, sacred to the god, its leaves chewed for their hallucinogenic properties, its branches woven into wreaths that adorned her head and the tripod upon which she would sit. The diet was austere, the days long, the nights filled with a haunting silence broken only by the whispers of the wind through the olive groves, a wind that seemed to carry the very breath of Apollo. The true terror, however, lay in the Adaton, the inner sanctum of the temple of Apollo, a place forbidden to all but the Pythia and the assisting priests. It was a subterranean chamber, dimly lit, its air heavy with the scent of burning laurel and the faint, unsettling aroma of the chasm from which the sacred vapors rose. You can almost feel the cold stone beneath your bare feet, hear the echo of your own anxious breathing in that hallowed space. The first time Thea entered, guided by an elder priestess, she felt a profound sense of foreboding. The chasm, a dark fissure in the earth, seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, a primeval force that both repelled and drew her in. She was told of the geologic vapors, the intoxicating gases that emanated from the earth, believed to be the very breath of Apollo himself. This was where she would commune with the divine, where her mortal self would be utterly subsumed by the god's will. The day of her first prophecy arrived, A day etched into her memory with the sharpest of fears. The procession of supplicants, their faces a mixture of hope, desperation, and terror, awaited her words. The male priests, the prophetai, stood ready to interpret her utterances, to translate the divine chaos into human understanding. She was led to the tripod, a three-legged stool placed directly over the chasm, the sacred vapor already beginning to rise, swirling around her like a ghostly shroud. You can imagine the tremor in her hands, the pounding of her heart, the desperate prayer for strength, for clarity, for an end to the overwhelming fear that as she sat, chewing the laurel leaves, breathing deep the intoxicating fumes, a profound shift began within her. It was not a gentle transition, but a violent wrenching, a tearing away of her individual consciousness. Her body became a conduit, a fragile vessel for an immense, uncontrollable power. The world around her blurred, colors intensified, sounds became distorted, and a torrent of images, visions, and fragmented words flooded her mind. It was as if 1,000 voices spoke at once, a cacophony of divine wisdom and cosmic truth, too vast for her mortal mind to comprehend, let alone articulate. She felt a searing heat, then a chilling cold, her limbs twitching uncontrollably. Her own voice, once soft and melodious, became harsh, guttural, alien. Words, not her own, tore from her throat, a jumble of ancient Greek, poetic metaphors and seemingly nonsensical sounds. The prophetai, seasoned in their roles, listened intently, their faces impassive as they scribbled notes, piecing together the divine riddle. For Thea, the experience was a maelstrom of disorientation, a terrifying surrender. When the trance finally receded, leaving her drained and trembling, she remembered little, if anything, of what she had said. A profound exhaustion settled upon her, a weariness that seeped into her bones. Her personal identity, the girl Thea, had been momentarily erased, replaced by the overwhelming presence of the god. This was the cost, the terrifying sacrifice demanded of a Pythia. To lose oneself repeatedly for the sake of divine communication. Her first prophecy, once interpreted and delivered to the anxious supplicants, solidified her new identity. She was no longer Thea, the shepherdess. She was the Pythia, the mouthpiece of Apollo, a living oracle. But with this new identity came an immense, crushing burden. The isolation was profound. She was set apart, revered yet feared, a sacred object rather than a human being. She could not marry, could not have children, could not live a normal life. Her days were a constant preparation for the next trance, her nights haunted by the echoes of divine whispers and the lingering disorientation. The pressure was immense. A wrong word, a misinterpreted utterance, could lead to disaster for a city-state, to the downfall of a king, to the loss of countless lives. The weight of the world, it seemed, rested on her fragile shoulders, or rather, on the words that tore through her. You, observing her, might feel a profound pity, even as you seek her divine wisdom. Her life was a paradox, revered yet utterly alone, powerful yet utterly powerless over her own fate. She was a bridge, yes, but a bridge that was constantly, painfully stretched between two worlds, the mortal and the divine, never truly belonging to either. Thea, now the Pythia, existed in a perpetual state of liminality, a living testament to the strange, often cruel demands of the gods, a silent scream woven into the very fabric of ancient Greek belief. Her dreams, when they came, were often fractured, filled with the same unsettling imagery that assailed her during her trances, a constant reminder that even in sleep, Apollo held sway over his chosen vessel. She was not just a priestess, she was a living sacrifice, her very being consecrated to a god who demanded everything. The price of prophecy was personal annihilation, a terrifying exchange of self for divine truth, a truth that often remained elusive even after the god had spoken. Delphi. The very name still echoes with the grandeur of an ancient power, a place where the earth itself seemed to breathe the divine. Perched precariously on the rugged slopes of Mount Parnassus, overlooking the dramatic Pleistos Valley, The sanctuary was not merely a collection of temples and treasuries, it was the undisputed spiritual and political heartbeat of the Hellenic world. To approach Delphi was to embark on a pilgrimage, a journey fraught with anticipation, reverence, and an undercurrent of profound terror. You, as a supplicant, would have felt it keenly, the air growing thin, the silence deepening, the very landscape seeming to shift, becoming imbued with a sacred, almost menacing presence. The climb itself was an act of devotion, a physical manifestation of the spiritual ascent. The sacred way, a winding path paved with ancient stones, led upwards through olive groves and past votive offerings left by generations of pilgrims. Each step brought you closer to the omphalos, the navel of the world, a conical stone marking the spot where Zeus's eagles were said to have met, signifying Delphi as the absolute center of the earth. This was no ordinary place. It was a nexus, a point where the divine intersected most directly with the mortal realm. The grandeur of the architecture, the gleaming marble of the Temple of Apollo, the intricate friezes depicting mythical battles and divine triumphs, all served to overwhelm the senses, to humble the individual before the immense power housed within. The treasuries, small, exquisitely crafted buildings erected by various city-states, each vying to display their piety and wealth, lined the path, glittering with offerings of gold, silver, and intricate artistry. They were not just storehouses, they were declarations of faith, tangible prayers for divine favor. But beneath this outward splendor lay an undercurrent of profound terror. The power of the oracle was absolute, its pronouncements capable of elevating kings or bringing empires to their knees. A wrong interpretation, a misstep in ritual, an angered god, these were not mere inconveniences but potential catastrophes. The fear was palpable, a silent hum that permeated the very stones of Delphi. Imagine you are a general, poised on the brink of a crucial battle, your city's fate hanging by a thread. You have traveled for weeks, perhaps months, to seek Apollo's counsel. The weight of your entire polis rests upon your shoulders. The Pythia's words, however obscure, will dictate your next move, perhaps even your ultimate survival. The stakes could not be higher. This was not a casual consultation. It was a life-or-death negotiation with the divine. The rituals leading up to the consultation were meticulously observed, designed to purify both the supplicant and the oracle, to ensure the god's benevolent attention. The supplicant underwent ritual purification in the Castalian spring, its icy waters a symbolic cleansing of sins and worldly concerns. Sacrifices were offered, often a goat, its behavior observed for omens. If the goat shivered when splashed with cold water, it was a good sign. If not, the consultation might be postponed, a terrifying delay that could prolong the agony of indecision. The priests, the hosiotes and propheti, were the gatekeepers, the interpreters and the guardians of these sacred rites. Their authority was immense, their knowledge of tradition absolute. They mediated between the supplicant and the Pythia, between the mortal and the divine. Then came the moment of truth, entry into the Adaton. You would not enter, of course, for only the Pythia and a select few priests were permitted. Instead, you would wait in the antechamber, your heart hammering against your ribs, listening to the muffled sounds from within. The Pythia, having undergone her own rigorous purification and preparation, would already be on the tripod, inhaling the sacred vapors, chewing the laurel leaves, entering the terrifying trance. The air, thick with the scent of burning laurel and the earthy, sulphurous fumes from the chasm, would seep out, carrying with it a sense of the otherworldly. You might hear her guttural cries, her fragmented words, a chilling, almost animalistic sound that spoke of a soul in torment, a body possessed. The propheti would emerge, their faces grave, to deliver the god's message. But the words were rarely straightforward. Apollo spoke in riddles, in poetic verses, in ambiguous pronouncements that required careful, often agonizing interpretation. This was the true terror, the burden of understanding. Was the oracle telling you to build a wooden wall, or to seek refuge in your ships? Was Salamis, a place of victory or defeat. The ambiguity was a double-edged sword. It preserved the oracle's infallibility. If a prophecy failed, it was always due to misinterpretation, not divine error. But for the supplicant, it introduced a new layer of anxiety, a desperate struggle to decipher the god's true intent. Consider the famous example of King Croesus of Lydia, who asked if he should attack the Persian Empire. The oracle famously replied, "If you attack, a great empire will be destroyed." Croesus, interpreting this as his own empire's victory, attacked and was utterly defeated, destroying his own great empire. The chilling brilliance of the oracle's ambiguity, its ability to always be right, even in apparent failure, solidified its terrifying reputation. You, the supplicant, knew this history, felt the weight of such potential missteps. Your entire future, your very life, could hinge on a single phrase, a nuanced word, a line of verse that could be twisted by fate or human folly. The Pythia herself, a woman lost in the throes of divine possession, was both revered and pitied. Her life was one of profound isolation, a constant struggle to reconcile her mortal self with the overwhelming presence of the god. She bore the physical and psychological toll of repeated trances, the disorientation, the exhaustion, the loss of her personal identity. She was a sacred object, a mouthpiece rather than a person. Her suffering was the price of divine communication, a necessary sacrifice for the continued well-being of the Hellenic world. And you, observing her, could not help but feel a profound sense of awe at her burden, even as you craved her terrifying wisdom. The power of Delphi extended far beyond individual consultations. It shaped colonization efforts, guiding settlers to new lands. It arbitrated disputes between city-states, its pronouncements carrying the weight of divine law. It offered counsel on legal reforms, on the founding of new cults, on the proper way to appease angered deities. Delphi was not just a religious center. It was a political force, a moral compass, a unifying element in a fragmented world. Its influence was so pervasive, so deeply ingrained in the Greek psyche, that to defy Delphi was to defy the gods themselves, an act of hubris unthinkable for most. Yet, even in its grandeur, Delphi held a constant reminder of the fragility of human existence and the unpredictable nature of the divine. The very chasm from which the vapors rose was a symbol of the earth's raw, untamed power, a constant whisper of the primordial chaos that lay beneath the ordered world. The Pythia, trembling on her tripod, was a stark reminder that humanity was but a humble servant to forces far greater than itself. You, leaving Delphi, would carry not just a prophecy, but an indelible impression of profound reverence, a healthy dose of fear, and an enduring sense of the strange, terrifying beauty of a world where gods walked among mortals, albeit through the tormented voice of a woman. The echo of her cries, the smell of laurel, the weight of the oracle's words, these would linger, shaping your decisions, influencing your destiny, a constant, subtle reminder that the divine was always watching, always speaking, always demanding its due. Far to the northwest, in the rugged mountains of Epirus, lay another ancient oracle, one that offered a stark contrast to the gleaming marble grandeur of Delphi. This was Dodona, the oldest Hellenic oracle, where the voice of Zeus himself was heard, not through a gas-induced trance, but through the rustling leaves of a sacred oak tree. You, a traveler from a distant polis, might approach Dodona with a different kind of awe, a more primeval reverence, a sense of stepping back into an even older, more elemental form of worship. The air here was not thick with laurel, but with the earthy scent of ancient trees, the murmur of wind, and the cooing of sacred doves. The heart of Dodona was the sacred grove, dominated by a magnificent ancient oak, its branches gnarled and vast, a living monument to centuries of divine communication. This was not a temple built by human hands, but a sanctuary crafted by nature itself, a testament to the raw, untamed power of Zeus, king of the gods. The priestesses of Dodona, known as the Selwa or Tamorwa, were not young virgins like the Pythia, but often older women, revered for their wisdom and their deep connection to the natural world. They lived a life of austerity, sleeping on the ground, never washing their feet, a practice meant to keep them intimately connected to the earth and its divine energies. Their appearance, rugged and unkempt, might have initially startled you, but their eyes held a profound ancient wisdom, a reflection of the centuries of secrets held by the sacred grove. The method of divination at Dodona was unique and deeply evocative. The priestesses would interpret the rustling of the oak leaves, listening for the subtle shifts in the wind, the whispers of Zeus. Sometimes, bronze cauldrons suspended from the tree would be struck, their resonant vibrations adding to the symphony of divine sound. The cooing of sacred doves, believed to be messengers of Zeus, also played a part in the complex tapestry of omens. Imagine yourself standing beneath that enormous oak, the wind sighing through its leaves, creating a chorus of murmurs, each rustle a syllable of divine intent. You would strain your ears, trying to discern the patterns, the hidden messages, the very breath of Zeus in the natural world around you. The questions posed at Dodona were often more personal, more immediate than the grand political inquiries at Delphi. Farmers might ask about crop yields, merchants about trade routes, individuals about marriage prospects or impending journeys. The answers, interpreted by the priestesses, were less cryptic than Delphi's riddles, often delivered in a straightforward, albeit still symbolic, manner. This made Dodona a more accessible oracle for the common person, a place where the gods felt closer, more intimately involved in the daily struggles of human life. You might feel a sense of comfort here, a connection to the earth and its cycles, a stark contrast to the intimidating intellectual challenge of Delphi's pronouncements. The priestesses of Dodona were deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature, their lives intertwined with the ancient oak and the surrounding wilderness. They understood the language of birds, the signs in the sky, the subtle shifts in the weather, all believed to be manifestations of Zeus's will. Their wisdom was not derived from scholarly texts or elaborate rituals, but from a profound, intuitive connection to the natural world. They were guardians of a primeval spirituality, keepers of an ancient flame that predated the rise of elaborate urban cults. Their existence was a testament to the enduring power of animism, the belief that the divine permeated all aspects of nature. However, their life was not without its own unique burdens and challenges. The isolation of Dodona, nestled deep in the mountains, meant a life largely removed from the bustling city-states. While Delphi's Pythia was a public figure, constantly under scrutiny, the priestesses of Dodona lived a more secluded existence, their wisdom sought out by those willing to make the arduous journey. Their commitment to their austere lifestyle, their renunciation of worldly comforts, was a constant act of devotion, a physical manifestation of their spiritual purity. They were seen as intermediaries, yes, but also as living embodiments of the wild, untamed spirit of Zeus. The interpretation of the oak's whispers required immense skill and intuition. It was not a simple act of listening, but a complex process of discerning patterns, understanding nuances, and drawing upon generations of accumulated wisdom. The priestesses had to be deeply steeped in the lore of Dodona, in the history of its prophecies, in the subtle ways Zeus chose to communicate through the natural world. A strong gust of wind, a sudden stillness, the precise angle of a branch, all could hold profound meaning. You watching them would marvel at their intense focus, their ability to find order and meaning in what might seem to others as mere atmospheric phenomena. The impact of Dodona, though perhaps less politically grand than Delphi, was no less profound on the lives of individuals. For a farmer struggling with a blighted harvest, a clear answer from Zeus, even if delivered through the rustling of leaves, could offer immense solace or a clear path forward. For a young couple seeking guidance on their marriage, the wisdom of the ancient priestesses, drawn from the very heart of nature, carried undeniable authority. Dodona offered a more grounded, more human-scale connection to the divine, a spiritual anchor in a world often beset by uncertainty. Over time, Dodona's influence waned somewhat in comparison to Delphi, particularly as the Hellenic world became more urbanized and sophisticated. Yet, its ancient roots and its unique method of divination ensured its continued reverence. Even in later periods, when more complex theological systems emerged, the simple, elemental power of Dodona held a timeless appeal. It was a place where the gods spoke directly through the earth, a testament to a primal connection between humanity and the natural forces that shaped its existence. The priestesses, guardians of this ancient tradition, faced the challenge of preserving its authenticity in a changing world. They were the living memory of Dodona, the conduits through whom the whispers of Zeus continued to echo. Their lives, though perhaps less dramatically intense than that of the Pythia, were equally dedicated, equally sacred, and equally isolated in their devotion. They were the silent, watchful sentinels of a sacred grove, their ears perpetually tuned to the language of the wind, their hearts open to the ancient wisdom of the earth. You, leaving the sacred grove, would carry with you the lingering sound of rustling leaves, the memory of ancient eyes, and a renewed sense of the profound mystery that lay hidden within the natural world. Dodona was a reminder that the divine was not confined to grand temples or human constructs, but could be found in the simplest, most elemental expressions of nature: a whisper on the wind, a coo from a dove, a subtle shift in the ancient leaves of a sacred oak. It was a place where the strange life of a priestess was one of quiet devotion, deep intuition, and an unwavering commitment to listening to the very breath of Zeus. The world of ancient Greece was one fraught with illness, pain, and a profound fear of death. When conventional medicine failed, when the body succumbed to unseen forces, where did one turn? Not always to the riddles of Apollo or the whispers of Zeus, but often to the healing god, Asclepius, and his network of sanctuaries, the Asclepia. Here, the priests were not prophets in the traditional sense, but healers, dream interpreters, and guardians of a sacred sleep that promised divine intervention. You, a desperate supplicant, perhaps racked by a persistent fever or a crippling ailment, would approach an Asclepian not with political questions, but with the raw, desperate plea for life itself. The atmosphere at an Asclepian was distinctly different from the awe-inspiring terror of Delphi or the primal reverence of Dodona. Here, hope mingled with the scent of herbs, the murmur of prayers, and the quiet groans of the afflicted. These sanctuaries were often situated in serene, natural settings, near springs or rivers, places believed to possess inherent healing properties. The most famous, like those at Epidaurus or Kos, boasted impressive temples, dormitories for the sick, and even theaters for entertainment, recognizing the holistic nature of healing. You would arrive, perhaps carried on a litter, your body weakened, your spirit frayed, clinging to the last vestiges of hope. The path to healing began with rigorous purification rituals. You would bathe in sacred waters, often involving cold plunges, and offer sacrifices to Asclepius, typically a cock or a goat. These acts were not just symbolic. They were preparations for the crucial stage of incubation, the sacred sleep. The priests dedicated to Asclepius guided you through these preliminary steps, their voices calm, their demeanor reassuring, yet firm in their adherence to the divine protocol. They were not just religious figures. They were also custodians of empirical medical knowledge, often combining spiritual rites with practical treatments like diet, exercise, and herbal remedies. The core of the healing process was the encoemesis or incubation. You would spend the night sleeping in the abaton, a sacred dormitory within the temple precincts. This was no ordinary sleep. It was a deliberate, ritualized slumber, undertaken with the fervent hope that Asclepius or his divine companions would appear to you in a dream, offering a diagnosis, a cure, or a specific instruction for recovery. Imagine yourself lying on a simple pallet, surrounded by other sufferers, the darkness thick with unspoken prayers and the soft sounds of troubled breathing. You would be encouraged to focus your mind on Asclepius, to invite his presence, to open yourself entirely to his divine intervention. The priest's role as dream interpreters was paramount. When you awoke, often disoriented and uncertain of what you had experienced, you would recount your dream to a priest. They, with their extensive knowledge of symbolism, divine lore, and perhaps a touch of psychological insight, would decipher the often cryptic messages. Did Asclepius appear as a serpent, his sacred animal? Did he touch the afflicted part of your body? Did he give you an instruction like, drink from this spring, or apply this salve? The priest's interpretation was the key to unlocking the divine cure. Their judgment was absolute, their guidance essential. The stories of miraculous cures from the Asclepia were legendary, inscribed on votive tablets and displayed within the sanctuaries for all to see. A blind man who regained his sight, a lame man who walked again, a barren woman who conceived. These were not just tales, but powerful affirmations of Asclepius's divine power and the efficacy of the priest's guidance. You, witnessing these tablets, would feel a surge of renewed hope, a belief that your own suffering could be alleviated, that the gods truly cared for mortal pain. However, the life of a priest of Asclepius was not without its own unique challenges. They lived in a constant state of proximity to human suffering, witnessing both miraculous cures and agonizing failures. They carried the burden of desperate hopes, the responsibility of interpreting the divine will for the sick and dying. While they offered solace and healing, they also had to contend with the limits of divine intervention and human understanding. They were practitioners of a sacred art, a delicate balance between faith and practical care. Their knowledge base was extensive, encompassing not just religious rites but also a rudimentary understanding of anatomy, herbalism, and psychology. They were proto-physicians, combining the spiritual with the empirical in a way that characterized much of ancient Greek thought. Their daily routines involved tending to the sick, performing sacrifices, maintaining the temple precincts, and constantly studying the art of dream interpretation. They were both spiritual guides and caregivers, their lives dedicated to alleviating suffering and facilitating divine healing. The Asclepia also functioned as centers of medical learning, contributing to the development of early Greek medicine. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, was said to have studied at the Asclepion on Kos. This blending of religious practice with empirical observation made the priests of Asclepius unique among their counterparts. They were not just channeling the gods, they were actively engaging with the physical world, seeking to understand and alleviate its ailments. For the priests, the conflict often lay in the tension between pure divine intervention and the need for practical human care. How much was the gods doing and how much was the priest's careful guidance, the patient's own belief, or the beneficial effects of rest and a healthy environment? This was a question that perhaps haunted some of them, a philosophical and theological tightrope walk. Yet, their commitment to their role remained unwavering, driven by a profound sense of duty to both the God and the suffering humanity he served. You, leaving an Asclepion, would carry not a cryptic prophecy, but perhaps a specific instruction, a prescribed regimen, or simply a renewed sense of peace and hope. The strange life of these priests was one of compassionate service, of deep empathy for human fragility, and of an unwavering belief in the power of sacred sleep to bridge the gap between illness and divine healing. They were the gentle guides in the terrifying landscape of ancient illness, offering a hallowed slumber where the gods might whisper the secrets of recovery, a testament to the enduring human need for both spiritual comfort and physical restoration. The lingering scent of medicinal herbs, the quiet murmur of prayers, and the memory of a dream, however fleeting, would stay with you, a testament to the strange, beautiful power of the healing God. Beyond the clamor of the city, nestled in the plains of Attica, lay Eleusis, home to the most profound and secretive religious rites of ancient Greece, the Eleusinian Mysteries. This was not an oracle to consult for battle strategies or a sanctuary for healing, but a sacred space where mortals sought a deeper understanding of life, death, and the promise of a blessed afterlife. The priests and priestesses here were not conduits for prophecy, but keepers of profound secrets, guides through an esoteric journey that promised not just knowledge, but an emotional transformation so powerful it was forbidden to speak of it. You, as a prospective initiate, would approach Eleusis with a mixture of fear, intense curiosity, and a yearning for meaning that transcended the everyday. The path to initiation was long and arduous, a testament to the profound significance of the mysteries. It began in Athens with a grand procession, the Pampa, marching along the sacred way to Eleusis. You would join a throng of initiates, men and women, rich and poor, free and slave, all united by a common desire for spiritual enlightenment. This democratic nature of the mysteries was itself remarkable, breaking down the rigid social hierarchies of Greek society, at least within the sacred context. The journey was not just physical, it was a symbolic pilgrimage, a shedding of the profane world as you moved towards the sacred. Upon arrival at Eleusis, you would undergo a series of purification rituals, including bathing in the sea, a symbolic cleansing of sins and worldly attachments. 4 days you would participate in preparatory rites, sacrifices and fasting, all designed to heighten your spiritual awareness and prepare you for the profound experience to come. The Hierophant, the chief priest, and the deduchos, the torchbearer, along with other sacred officials, would oversee these rituals, their presence radiating an ancient authority, their knowledge of the mysteries absolute and impenetrable. Their faces, often veiled or solemn, added to the mystique, emphasizing the sacred and forbidden nature of the knowledge they guarded. The heart of the Eleusinian mysteries lay in the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation, a vast, windowless building designed to hold hundreds of initiates in complete darkness. It was here, during the climactic ritual, that the secrets were revealed, the sacred objects displayed, and the profound, transformative experience unfolded. What exactly transpired within the Telesterion remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, for initiates were bound by a sacred oath of silence, punishable by death. This oath, the erhetophoria, was so deeply respected that not a single initiate, even under torture, is known to have revealed the secrets. You, having taken that oath, would feel its weight, its profound significance, a bond that connected you to generations of initiates across the Hellenic world. Historians and scholars have speculated for centuries about the nature of the revelation. Was it a dramatic reenactment of the myth of Demeter and Persephone, symbolizing death and rebirth? Was it the consumption of a sacred psychoactive drink, the Kykeon, inducing visions? Was it the display of sacred objects, perhaps a simple ear of corn, imbued with profound symbolic meaning of fertility and life's cyclical nature? Whatever it was, the experience was universally described as profoundly moving, life-altering, offering a sense of peace, clarity, and a blessed hope for the afterlife. It was an emotional climax, a spiritual awakening that promised an escape from the dread of oblivion. The priests and priestesses of Eleusis were not just performers of rituals. They were the living embodiment of the mysteries, the guardians of a sacred tradition that stretched back into pre-Hellenic times. The Hierophant, in particular, held immense power and reverence. He was the revealer of the sacred things, the one who unveiled the epoptea, the culminating vision for the initiates. His life was one of profound dedication, bound by strict rules of purity and ritual, his every action imbued with sacred significance. He was the direct link to Demeter and Persephone, the conduit through whom their divine story was reenacted and revealed. The secret nature of the mysteries meant that the priests and priestesses lived a life set apart, their inner world rich with knowledge forbidden to others. This created a unique form of isolation, a shared burden of profound wisdom that could not be openly discussed. They bore the immense responsibility of preserving the integrity of the rites, ensuring that the ancient traditions were faithfully transmitted to each new generation of initiates. Their role was not to interpret the future, but to reveal the eternal truths of existence, to offer solace in the face of death, and to promise a hopeful journey beyond. The emotional impact on initiates was undeniable. Many describe the experience as a profound transformation, a shedding of fear, a newfound sense of purpose and peace. The promise of a better afterlife, a life among the blessed, offered immense comfort in a world where death was often seen as a terrifying plunge into Hades' gloomy realm. You, having undergone the initiation, would emerge from the telesterion with a changed perspective, a sense of belonging to a sacred community, and a secret knowledge that bound you to countless others, a silent understanding of life's profound cycles. The Eleusinian mysteries endured for nearly 2 millennia, a testament to their enduring power and the profound human need for spiritual meaning. Even as other cults rose and fell, Eleusis remained a beacon of hope and esoteric wisdom. The priests and priestesses, through their dedication and their unwavering commitment to secrecy, ensured that the sacred flame continued to burn, offering its light to generations of seeking souls. Their strange life was one defined by an ultimate trust, a profound responsibility, and the quiet, unwavering guardianship of humanity's deepest spiritual yearning. You, leaving Eleusis, would carry not just a memory but a transformed soul, a quiet understanding of things unutterable, a secret that would forever shape your perception of life and death. The air would feel different, the world imbued with a new layer of meaning, a testament to the profound power of those who kept the secrets, those who guided mortals through the darkness to the promise of eternal light. The Eleusinian mysteries, through the dedicated lives of its priests and priestesses, offered not just a ritual, but a spiritual rebirth, a strange and beautiful journey into the heart of existence itself. Beyond the Aegean, on the coast of Asia Minor, stood Didyma, another colossal sanctuary dedicated to Apollo, second only to Delphi in its reputation and architectural ambition. Here the oracle spoke through a priestess, much like Delphi, but the setting and the methods held their own distinct, dramatic flavor. You, a pilgrim from the Ionian cities or further east, would approach Didyma with a sense of awe, perhaps tinged with the melancholy awareness that its greatest days of glory were long past, its immense scale a testament to a power that had once been absolute, now perhaps an echo. The temple at Didyma was a marvel of the ancient world, a colossal structure so vast it was never fully roofed, its immense columns reaching towards the sky like petrified trees. Within its open-air cella or inner sanctuary, stood the smaller temple housing the sacred spring, the source of the oracle's power. This was not a dark chasm, but a freshwater spring, its waters believed to be imbued with Apollo's divine essence. The priestess, known as the Didymean prophetess, would drink from this spring, or perhaps inhale its vapors, to induce her trance. Imagine the sheer scale of the place, the feeling of insignificance as you stood before columns so thick you could barely encompass them with your arms, gazing up at a sky that served as the temple's only roof. The oracle at Didyma had a long and turbulent history. It rose to prominence under the patronage of the wealthy Ionian cities, particularly Miletus, which controlled the sanctuary. Its priests, known as the Branchidae, claimed direct descent from Branchus, a youth beloved by Apollo who was said to have founded the oracle. These priests were not just ritual specialists, they were also powerful political figures, often influencing the policies and alliances of the Ionian states. Their lineage and their close ties to Miletus gave them immense authority, but also made them vulnerable to political upheavals. The most dramatic moment in Didyma's history came with the Persian invasion of 494 BCE. After the Ionian revolt, the Persians sacked Miletus and in an act of profound sacrilege, destroyed the temple at Didyma, carrying off the cult statue of Apollo and massacring the Branchidae priests. This was a catastrophic blow, a moment of profound despair for the faithful, a stark reminder of the fragility of even divine institutions in the face of human brutality. You, hearing this history, would feel the chilling weight of that destruction, the fear that even the gods could be silenced, their servants annihilated. For centuries, the oracle lay in ruins, a desolate testament to Persian wrath. Then, with the conquests of Alexander the Great, a new era began. Alexander, ever keen to legitimize his rule through divine favor, consulted the oracle at Didyma, which miraculously began to speak again, proclaiming him the son of Zeus. This act of divine endorsement revitalized the sanctuary, leading to a massive rebuilding effort. The new temple, even grander than its predecessor, was a symbol of renewed hope, a testament to Apollo's enduring power. But the memory of its destruction, the vulnerability of its priests, lingered like a ghost in the vast open-air sanctuary. The life of the Didymean prophetess, like her Delphic counterpart, was one of profound isolation and sacrifice. Chosen for her purity, she would undergo rigorous purification rituals before each consultation. Her trance, induced by drinking the sacred water, would transform her into a vessel for Apollo's words. However, unlike Delphi, where male propheti interpreted the Pythia's often incoherent utterances, at Didyma, the priestess was said to deliver her prophecies in a more coherent, though still poetic, form. This placed an even greater burden on her, demanding not just divine possession but also a degree of linguistic clarity. The political influence of Didyma, especially during its periods of glory, was immense. Kings and city-states sought its counsel on matters of war, colonization, and law. The priests, the branchidae, wielded significant power, their interpretations shaping the destinies of entire regions. This power, however, came at a cost. The priests were often caught in the crosscurrents of political intrigue, their loyalty to Apollo sometimes clashing with the demands of their patrons or the shifting tides of power. Their lives were a delicate dance between divine service and mortal politics, a perilous tightrope walk that could have devastating consequences, as evidenced by the Persian massacre. The oracle also faced challenges from the rise of skepticism and philosophy. As rational thought gained ground, the unquestioning faith in divine pronouncements began to wane among some intellectuals. The ambiguity of prophecies, while preserving the oracle's infallibility, also fueled doubt. For the priests and the prophetess, this meant a constant struggle to maintain the sanctity and authority of their institution in a changing intellectual landscape. They had to defend their traditions, reaffirm their connection to Apollo, and continue to provide guidance in a world that was increasingly questioning the very nature of divine intervention. In later Roman times, Didyma continued to function, albeit with a diminished glory. The vast, unfinished temple stood as a poignant reminder of past ambitions, a symbol of a fading era. The life of the Didymean prophetess in these later centuries would have been one of profound devotion, perhaps tinged with a sense of melancholy, a quiet struggle to maintain the ancient traditions in a world that was slowly but surely moving away from polytheism. She was a guardian of a fading echo, a keeper of a flame that once burned brightly across the Aegean, now flickering against the encroaching shadows of a new age. You, standing amidst the colossal ruins of Didyma, would feel the weight of its history, the grandeur and the terror, the rise and the fall. The strange life of its priests and prophetesses was one of immense power and profound vulnerability, a testament to the enduring human need for divine guidance, even when that guidance came at a terrible cost. The whispers of Apollo, once thundering across the Ionian coast, had become a softer murmur, a fading echo in the vast open-air sanctuary, a poignant reminder of the cycle of destruction and rebirth that marked the destiny of even the most sacred places. The wind through the colossal columns would seem to carry the ghosts of past prophecies, of lost empires, and of the dedicated, often tragic lives of those who dared to speak for the gods. Zeus, the king of the gods, wielded thunderbolts and commanded the heavens. His priests across ancient Greece were not typically oracular figures, but rather guardians of justice, upholders of oaths and orchestrators of the grand public sacrifices that bound communities to the divine order. Their lives were steeped in ritual and authority, embodying the awesome, often terrifying power of the Sky Father. You, as a citizen of a Greek polis, would encounter the priests of Zeus not in the hushed terror of an oracle, but in the bustling agora at the city's gates, or at the altar during major festivals, witnessing their grave demeanor and feeling the weight of their sacred duty. The role of a priest of Zeus was multifaceted, extending far beyond the confines of a temple. They were central to the civic and political life of the city-state. Oaths, those solemn vows made before the gods, were often sworn in the presence of a priest of Zeus, invoking the king of the gods as a witness and enforcer. Imagine two disputing parties, their hands on a sacrificial animal, their eyes meeting the unwavering gaze of the priest. The fear of perjury, of incurring Zeus's wrath, was a powerful deterrent, and the priest served as the physical embodiment of that divine threat. To break an oath sworn before Zeus was to invite catastrophic retribution, not just upon the individual but potentially upon the entire community. The priest, by his very presence, underscored the immense stakes involved. Sacrifice was another cornerstone of their duties. Public sacrifices to Zeus were grand, communal affairs, designed to honor the god, secure his favor, and reaffirm the collective piety of the polis. The priest of Zeus would preside over these elaborate rituals, meticulously ensuring every step was followed according to ancient tradition. From the solemn procession of the sacrificial animal, often a bull or an ox, adorned with garlands, to the precise cutting of its throat, the burning of its choicest parts on the altar, and the communal feast that followed, every action was imbued with sacred significance. You, participating in such a ceremony, would feel the raw power of collective belief, the visceral connection to the divine through the spilling of blood and the shared meal. The priest, with his knowledge of omens and his command of ritual, was the indispensable guide through this sacred drama. The priests of Zeus also played a crucial role in maintaining social order and ensuring justice. They were often consulted on matters of law, particularly those pertaining to religious transgressions or disputes that invoked divine judgment. Their pronouncements, while not prophecies, carried immense moral authority, grounded in their deep understanding of divine law and tradition. They were conduits of Zeus's justice, not through direct revelation, but through their guardianship of established religious principles. This made their lives a constant balancing act between upholding sacred law and navigating the complex, often messy realities of human conflict. Their lives were characterized by immense responsibility and a rigorous adherence to ritual purity. They had to maintain a spotless reputation, for any perceived impurity or moral failing could undermine their authority and potentially anger the very God they served. They lived in a state of constant vigilance, their every public action scrutinized, their private lives expected to be exemplary. This created a unique form of isolation, a separation from the ordinary concerns of daily life, as they were expected to embody the highest ideals of piety and justice. Unlike the Pythia, whose identity was subsumed by the god, the priest of Zeus maintained his individual identity, but it was an identity profoundly shaped and elevated by his sacred office. He was a respected elder, a figure of authority, a moral compass for his community. His wisdom was sought not for glimpses of the future, but for guidance on how to live righteously in the present, how to honor the gods, and how to maintain the delicate balance between human society and divine will. The training for a priest of Zeus was extensive, involving years of study of sacred texts, hymns, and the intricate details of ritual. They had to be masters of ancient lore, well-versed in the genealogies of the gods, the myths, and the precedents for divine intervention. They also needed a strong understanding of civic law and custom, as their roles often intertwined the religious with the secular. This intellectual rigor, combined with their spiritual dedication, made them formidable figures within their communities. The conflict in the life of a priest of Zeus might arise when divine law clashed with political expediency or popular opinion. Imagine a situation where a powerful citizen has clearly perjured himself, but his influence makes it difficult to prosecute. The priest faces a stark choice: uphold the sacred oath and risk political reprisal, or compromise his principles and risk incurring Zeus's wrath. These were the heavy burdens they carried, the constant tension between mortal and divine demands. Their resolution ideally was always to side with the divine, trusting in Zeus's ultimate justice, even if it meant personal sacrifice. The impact of the priests of Zeus on the fabric of Greek society was profound. They instilled a deep respect for oaths, a fear of divine retribution for injustice, and a sense of communal responsibility to the gods. They were the anchors of religious tradition, the living link to the supreme deity, ensuring that the moral and spiritual foundations of the polis remained strong. Their presence at public gatherings, their solemn pronouncements, and their meticulous performance of sacred rites reinforced the collective belief system, binding citizens together under the watchful eye of the Sky Father. You, observing a priest of Zeus, would feel a deep sense of respect, perhaps a healthy dose of fear. His life was not about ecstatic visions, but about the steady, unwavering stewardship of divine law and communal piety. He was a pillar of stability, a constant reminder of the awesome power of Zeus, and the imperative to live justly. His strange life was one of profound responsibility, unwavering dedication, and the quiet, powerful guardianship of the very moral order of the Hellenic world. The thunder of Zeus, in a sense, echoed through his solemn pronouncements, a constant reminder that even the highest authority among mortals was ultimately subservient to the king of the gods. While the Pythia uttered prophecies and the Hierophant revealed cosmic truths, the vast majority of individuals serving the gods in ancient Greece held less dramatic, yet equally vital roles: the temple attendants. These priests, priestesses, and various cult functionaries were the unsung heroes of daily religious life, the meticulous custodians of sacred space, ritual, and the very connection between mortals and deities. Their lives were a strange blend of the mundane and the divine, a constant dance between practical duties and spiritual devotion. You, as a visitor to a temple, would first encounter these individuals, their quiet diligence and unwavering focus setting the tone for your sacred encounter. From the grand temples of Athena in Athens to the smaller, local shrines dedicated to nymphs or heroes, every sacred precinct required a dedicated staff. These roles varied widely. There were neokoroi temple wardens responsible for cleaning and maintenance, klerouchoi who managed temple lands and finances, thaites who performed sacrifices, and countless others who tended to the altars, cared for cult statues, prepared offerings, and guided supplicants. Their lives were not about individual glory or dramatic pronouncements, but about the collective, continuous service to the gods. Consider the life of Aeneakoros at the Parthenon. His days would begin before dawn, sweeping the marble floors, polishing the bronze statues, ensuring every corner of the sacred space was immaculate. The temple was not just a building, it was the dwelling place of the goddess, and its cleanliness and order were paramount to her honor. He would prepare the altars for daily offerings, lay out the sacred implements, and ensure that the oil lamps burned brightly. His work, though seemingly mundane, was an act of profound devotion, a constant reaffirmation of the goddess's presence within her sanctuary. You, witnessing his quiet diligence, would feel the reverence that permeated every task, every gesture. The thaites or sacrificers held a particularly crucial role. They were the ones who performed the blood sacrifices that were central to Greek worship. This was not a task for the squeamish. It required precision, strength, and an intimate knowledge of the elaborate rituals. The thaites had to be skilled in handling animals, in discerning omens from their entrails, and in ensuring that the sacrifice was pleasing to the god. Their hands, though stained with blood, were considered sacred, performing the most vital act of communication between the human and divine realms. Their lives were a constant engagement with the raw, visceral reality of ancient religion, a testament to the belief that life was given in exchange for divine favor. Priestesses, often chosen from noble families or dedicated from childhood, served various goddesses, overseeing their cults and performing specific rituals. For a priestess of Hera, for instance, her duties might involve leading processions, tending to the goddess's sacred garments, or presiding over rites related to marriage and childbirth. Her life was one of public service, her personal identity often subsumed by her sacred office. She was a living symbol of the goddess's presence, an embodiment of the divine feminine within the community. Her daily routine was a structured tapestry of ritual, prayer, and the meticulous care of the goddess's domain. The financial aspects of temple management were often handled by specific priests or boards of officials. Temples were often wealthy institutions, possessing vast tracts of land, receiving numerous donations, and sometimes even functioning as banks. The priests responsible for these duties had to be astute administrators, managing complex accounts and ensuring the proper use of sacred funds. Their lives were a blend of spiritual devotion and practical economics, a unique intersection of the sacred and the secular. A significant challenge for temple attendants was the sheer repetition of their duties. Day after day, year after year, the same rituals, the same cleaning, the same prayers. It required immense discipline and an unwavering faith to prevent these sacred tasks from becoming mere routine. The conflict, for some, might have been the struggle against spiritual complacency, the constant effort to infuse each action with genuine devotion. The resolution, for those who truly embraced their calling, was to find profound meaning in the repetition, to see each mundane task as a direct offering to the gods, a continuous act of piety. The isolation of temple life, even amidst a bustling city, could also be profound. While they interacted with supplicants, their primary allegiance was to the divine. Their lives were structured by the demands of the cult, often requiring celibacy, specific dietary restrictions, or a renunciation of certain worldly pleasures. This set them apart, creating a unique community of devoted servants within the larger polis. You, observing their disciplined lives, would sense this separation, this single-minded dedication that transcended ordinary human concerns. The daily rhythm of a temple attendant's life was a testament to the enduring power of Greek polytheism. From the lighting of the first lamp at dawn to the closing of the temple gates at dusk, their every action was an affirmation of the gods' presence and their vital role in human affairs. They were the silent, steadfast guardians of the sacred, the meticulous orchestrators of rituals that bound communities to the divine. Their strange life was not one of dramatic pronouncements, but of quiet, unwavering service, a profound dedication to maintaining the delicate balance between the mortal and immortal realms, ensuring that the gods were properly honored and their sanctuaries forever kept sacred. You, leaving a Greek temple, would carry not just the memory of grand architecture or impressive statues, but also the impression of these dedicated individuals. Their unseen labor, their quiet devotion, and their meticulous care were the invisible threads that held the fabric of ancient Greek religion together, ensuring that the sacred spaces remained vibrant, active conduits for divine communication, a constant, tangible reminder of the gods' presence in the world. Not all oracles in ancient Greece offered cryptic riddles or healing dreams. Some promised a confrontation so terrifying, so profoundly unsettling, that it could forever alter the supplicant's very psyche. Such was the oracle of Trophonius at Lebedia in Boeotia, a place where prophecy was not delivered through a priestess on a tripod, but through a terrifying, subterranean journey into the earth itself. You, contemplating a visit to Trophonius, would feel a fear unlike any other, a dread that seeped into your bones, knowing that this was not a consultation for the faint of heart, but a descent into a psychological abyss. The reputation of Trophonius preceded it, whispered in hushed tones across the Hellenic world. It was known as the Cave of Trophonius, or more ominously, the Mouth of the Earth. Those who sought its counsel were not merely seeking answers, they were seeking a profound, often traumatic encounter with the chthonic powers of the underworld. Unlike the open grandeur of Delphi, Trophonius was shrouded in an atmosphere of claustrophobia and primal fear. The preparation for this oracle was far more rigorous and psychologically demanding than any other. For several days, the supplicant would reside in a specially built house near the oracle, undergoing a regimen of purification, fasting and ritual baths in the nearby river Hercyna. They were forbidden from bathing in warm water, consuming certain foods, and were expected to perform specific sacrifices. The priests of Trophonius, known as the Trophoniidae, were stern, unsmiling figures, their demeanor reflecting the gravity of the impending ordeal. They would instruct the supplicant in the precise rituals, preparing them not just physically but psychologically for the descent. These priests were not just guides, they were also guardians of the supplicant's sanity, for the experience was known to drive some to madness. During this preparatory period, the supplicant would also offer sacrifices to various deities, including Apollo, Cronus, Zeus, Hera, and Demeter, seeking their favor and protection for the terrifying journey ahead. You would witness these sacrifices, feeling the mounting tension, the growing sense of dread as the moment of truth approached. The air would be heavy with the smell of burning offerings and the unspoken fear of what lay beneath the earth. The culmination of the preparation was the drinking of two distinct waters from the river Hercyna, the water of forgetfulness, *lethe*, to erase all worldly cares and anxieties, and the water of memory, *mnemosyne*, to ensure that the prophetic vision, however terrifying, would be retained. This ritual itself speaks volumes about the nature of the oracle. It was so overwhelming that one needed to forget the mundane world to fully experience it, yet also remember its profound, unsettling truths. Then came the descent. Dressed in linen robes and special boots, the supplicant was led by the priest to the oracle's entrance, a small, dark opening in the earth. Inside, a narrow, claustrophobic passage led downwards, illuminated only by flickering torches carried by the priests. At the bottom of this passage lay a small man-made chamber, and within it, a deep, narrow hole. This was the chasm, the true mouth of Trophonius. The supplicant, holding honey cakes to ward off subterranean snakes and spirits, would be instructed to lower themselves feet first into this hole. What happened next was a terrifying, sensory deprivation experience combined with profound psychological trauma. As you descended, the darkness would become absolute, the silence deafening, broken only by your own ragged breathing. You would feel a sudden, violent pull, as if unseen hands were dragging you deeper into the earth. The air would grow heavy, perhaps with the scent of damp earth and something else, something primal and unsettling. The experience was described as a terrifying rush, a profound disorientation, a feeling of being utterly consumed by the earth. Within this chthonic darkness, the prophecy was received. It was not a voice, not a vision, but an overwhelming, often traumatic, psychological experience. Some reported seeing terrifying apparitions, others heard strange, disembodied voices, while still others experienced a profound, unsettling silence that communicated truths directly to their soul. The prophecy was often a direct, visceral confrontation with their deepest fears, their most profound anxieties, or the raw, unvarnished truth of their situation. It was a shattering rather than an illuminating experience. When finally pulled back up by the priests, the supplicant would emerge pale, trembling, often catatonic, their face etched with a profound horror. They would be utterly disoriented, unable to speak, their minds reeling from the subterranean ordeal. The priests would then lead them to a special seat called the chair of mnemosyne, where they would be encouraged to recount their experience, to articulate the unspeakable. The priests, with their knowledge of Trophonius' methods, would then help interpret the traumatic vision, piecing together the prophetic message from the raw fragments of fear and psychological shock. The psychological impact of the Trophonius oracle was immense. Many emerged forever changed, their joy and laughter seemingly drained from them, replaced by a permanent solemnity. It was said that those who consulted Trophonius never smiled again. This profound, often negative, transformation underscored the terrifying power of the oracle. It offered truth, yes, but at a profound personal cost, a price paid in the very fabric of one's sanity and emotional well-being. The priests, in their role as interpreters and guardians, bore witness to this profound human suffering, their lives dedicated to facilitating this terrifying encounter with the chthonic divine. Their role was not to offer comfort, but to guide the supplicant through an ordeal, to ensure the sacred rites were observed, and to help process the traumatic aftermath. They were the stoic, unwavering anchors in a storm of psychological torment, their lives bound to the dark mysteries of Trophonius. Their strange life was one of constant exposure to extreme human fear and psychological distress, a testament to the darker, more primal aspects of ancient Greek religion, where truth was not always a gift, but a terrifying confrontation. You, observing a supplicant emerge from Trophonius, their face a mask of terror and profound shock, would feel a chilling certainty that some truths are best left undisturbed, some divine encounters too potent for mortal minds. The oracle of Trophonius was a stark reminder that the gods were not always benevolent, and their wisdom sometimes came at the price of one's very soul, a descent into fear and trembling that left an indelible mark on all who dared to seek its terrifying counsel. The memory of that profound dread, the image of that shattered face, would forever haunt you, a chilling testament to the strange, dark power of the earth's mouth. In the fragmented, often warring world of ancient Greece, where city-states constantly vied for power, resources, and influence, the oracles, particularly Delphi, wielded an unseen, yet undeniably potent, political hand. Their pronouncements shaped alliances, dictated military campaigns, sanctioned colonization efforts, and even influenced the drafting of laws. The lives of the high priests and priestesses, therefore, were inextricably intertwined with the grand narratives of power, ambition, and the very destiny of the Hellenic world. You, a leader of a polis, would feel the immense pressure of seeking divine counsel, knowing that the oracle's words could make or break your city, your legacy, and your very life. The most famous example of this political influence was Delphi. City-states, before embarking on major undertakings, would send embassies to consult the Pythia. Before founding a new colony, it was considered essential to seek Apollo's blessing and guidance on the most auspicious location. Imagine a group of desperate Athenians, their city threatened by the mighty Persian Empire, sending an envoy to Delphi. The first prophecy they received was terrifying. "Wretch, why sit you? Fly to the ends of the earth." It spoke of utter destruction. The second, after fervent prayers and further supplication, offered a glimmer of hope. "Though all else be taken, Zeus grants to Pallas a wooden wall that shall not fall." The interpretation of this wooden wall became a matter of intense political debate in Athens, with Themistocles famously arguing it referred to their fleet, while others believed it meant the Acropolis itself. The fate of Athens, and indeed all of Greece, hung on this single ambiguous prophecy. The weight of such interpretation, the immense pressure on the propheti to guide their city, was immense. The priests of Delphi, the propheti and Hosiotes, were not merely interpreters, they were powerful figures in their own right. They mediated access to the oracle, framed the questions, and delivered the interpreted answers. Their knowledge of Greek politics, history, and current events was extensive, allowing them to craft ambiguous prophecies that often reflected the prevailing wisdom or offered shrewd, politically astute advice. They were masters of diplomacy, often acting as intermediaries between warring city-states, their pronouncements sometimes subtly nudging towards peace or alliance. Their lives were a constant engagement with the highest echelons of power, their wisdom sought by kings, tyrants, and democratic assemblies alike. Colonization was another area where the oracle's political influence was paramount. Before venturing into unknown lands to establish new settlements, Greek cities almost invariably consulted Delphi. The oracle would provide guidance on where to settle, often naming specific locations or giving cryptic instructions that, in hindsight, proved remarkably accurate. This divine sanction gave immense legitimacy to the colonial ventures, inspiring confidence in the settlers and providing a spiritual justification for their expansion. The oracle, in effect, was an invisible empire builder, its pronouncements shaping the geographic and cultural landscape of the wider Mediterranean. Even within city-states, the oracle could influence lawmaking and constitutional reforms. Lycurgus, the legendary lawgiver of Sparta, was said to have consulted Delphi extensively in shaping the Spartan constitution, giving his reforms a divine imprimatur. This divine endorsement made the laws far harder to challenge, embedding them with a sacred authority that transcended mere human decree. The priests, by their role in sanctioning such reforms, became instrumental in shaping the fundamental structures of Greek society. The burden on the Pythia herself, though perhaps not directly involved in the political machinations, was immense. She was the vessel, the conduit through whom these world-altering pronouncements flowed. She bore the physical and psychological toll of channeling Apollo's will, knowing that her often garbled words would be meticulously dissected and interpreted, with monumental consequences. Her life, though isolated, was at the very center of the Hellenic political stage, a silent, suffering instrument of divine power. The conflict inherent in this nexus of prophecy and politics was constant. Priests had to navigate the fine line between divine truth and political expediency. They might be pressured by powerful patrons to deliver favorable prophecies, or they might face the wrath of a city-state whose ambitions were thwarted by an unfavorable pronouncement. Maintaining the oracle's reputation for impartiality and divine authority, while simultaneously engaging with the messy realities of human power struggles, was a constant, delicate balancing act. The resolution for the most principled priests was to maintain their integrity, to trust in Apollo's wisdom, and to accept the consequences, even if it meant incurring mortal displeasure. The political role of the oracles, especially Delphi, also contributed to a sense of pan-Hellenic identity. Despite their internecine conflicts, Greek city-states shared a common reverence for Delphi, a shared belief in its divine authority. This shared religious institution provided a rare point of unity in a highly fragmented world, a place where all Greeks, regardless of their polis, could seek divine guidance. The priests, by their pan-Hellenic service, fostered this sense of shared cultural and religious identity. You, a statesman or general, would leave Delphi not just with a prophecy, but with the chilling awareness of the oracle's immense power. Your decisions, your city's fate, your very place in history, were now intertwined with the ambiguous words of a god, interpreted by his shrewd and powerful priests. The strange life of these priests and oracles was one of immense, almost unbearable responsibility, their pronouncements acting as the unseen hand that guided, shaped, and sometimes shattered the political landscape of ancient Greece, a testament to the enduring human desire to find divine justification for mortal ambition. The echoes of those prophecies, delivered from the depths of a chasm, resonated through the council chambers and battlefields, shaping the very course of history. While faith in the gods and their oracles was deeply ingrained in the fabric of ancient Greek society, it was not monolithic. From the earliest pre-Socratic thinkers to the sophisticated arguments of later philosophers, whispers of doubt, critical questioning, and outright skepticism challenged the authority of priests and the veracity of oracles. This intellectual ferment created a strange tension in the lives of those dedicated to divine service, forcing them to confront not just the mysteries of the gods, but also the rising tide of human reason. You, a priest or oracle, would feel the subtle shift in the intellectual winds, the uncomfortable questions that began to prick at the edges of unquestioning faith. The earliest challenges came from philosophers who sought natural explanations for phenomena traditionally attributed to divine intervention. Thinkers like Thales and Anaximander proposed rational cosmologies, suggesting that the world operated according to discernible laws, not merely the whims of arbitrary gods. This scientific impulse, however nascent, began to chip away at the absolute necessity of divine pronouncements for understanding the world. For a priest, these emerging ideas presented a subtle but profound challenge to their traditional role as interpreters of divine will. The sophists, masters of rhetoric and critical thought, took skepticism a step further. Protagoras' famous dictum, "Man is the measure of all things," placed human reason and perception at the center, questioning the ability to know anything definitively about the gods. Gorgias, another sophist, famously argued that nothing exists, or if it does, it cannot be known, or if it can be known, it cannot be communicated. Such radical skepticism directly undermined the very premise of oracular pronouncements and priestly authority, reducing divine messages to mere human constructs or unknowable truths. Imagine a priest, steeped in generations of sacred tradition, suddenly confronted by a brilliant young sophist who dissects the ambiguity of a Delphic prophecy, not as divine wisdom, but as clever rhetoric designed to maintain power. The conflict was profound. Socrates, though deeply pious in his own way and famously guided by his daimonion, an inner divine voice, still challenged conventional wisdom and encouraged critical self-examination. His method of questioning, pushing individuals to define their beliefs, could inadvertently expose the inconsistencies or unexamined assumptions behind popular religious practices. While not directly attacking the oracles, his emphasis on rational inquiry fostered an intellectual environment where blind faith was increasingly questioned. Plato, in his philosophical dialogues, grappled with the nature of divine inspiration and knowledge. While acknowledging the possibility of prophetic states, he often privileged philosophical reason as a higher path to truth. He saw the world of appearances as a shadow of a more perfect, rational realm of forms. For a priest, this intellectual hierarchy could feel like a demotion, placing their direct, emotional connection to the divine below the abstract, intellectual pursuit of philosophy. The strange life of a priest now included not just serving the gods, but also defending their relevance in an increasingly rationalized world. The ambiguity of oracular pronouncements, while serving to protect the oracle's infallibility, also provided fertile ground for skeptical critique. When Croesus's great empire turned out to be his own, it was easy for a skeptic to scoff at the oracle's cunning rather than marvel at its divine foresight. The propheti, tasked with interpreting these riddles, faced the immense pressure of providing an explanation that satisfied both the faithful and the increasingly critical. Their lives became a constant intellectual and spiritual defense, navigating accusations of manipulation or mere human guesswork. For the oracles themselves, particularly the Pythia, the whispers of doubt might have been deeply internal. Did she truly believe the gods spoke through her, or was it merely the effect of the vapors, her own subconscious, or the expectations of the supplicants? The psychological toll of being a vessel, coupled with the erosion of unquestioning belief in society, could lead to profound personal crises of faith. Her strange life, already isolated, could become even more so, a solitary struggle with the nature of her own divine connection in a world that increasingly questioned its authenticity. The priests, in response to these challenges, often emphasized the antiquity of their traditions, the unbroken lineage of their service, and the tangible evidence of past prophecies fulfilled. They would point to the enduring power of the gods, the dangers of impiety, and the need for reverence. Their role became not just one of ritual, but also of apologetic, defending the sacred against the encroachments of secular reason. This intellectual engagement added a new dimension to their strange lives, transforming them from mere ritualists into defenders of faith. The conflict between faith and reason was never fully resolved in ancient Greece. It remained a vibrant tension that shaped its intellectual and religious landscape. However, the rise of skepticism undoubtedly altered the environment in which priests and oracles operated. Their authority, while still immense, was no longer absolute for all. They had to contend with a more critical public, a more questioning elite, and perhaps, even internal doubts within their own ranks. You, a priest, would feel the weight of this intellectual challenge. Your life, once purely dedicated to the unquestioning service of the gods, now included the subtle burden of defending that faith against the sharp edges of philosophical inquiry. The confident pronouncements of old were now met with thoughtful questions. the awe with critical analysis. The strange life of a priest in this era was one of navigating a shifting intellectual landscape, a constant effort to reconcile ancient devotion with the relentless march of human reason, ensuring that the whispers of the gods could still be heard above the growing clamor of doubt. To be a priest or an oracle in ancient Greece was to live a life profoundly set apart, a strange existence defined by a unique blend of reverence, power, and an often crushing personal burden of isolation and sacrifice. These were not roles sought for personal gain or comfort, but callings that demanded the renunciation of many aspects of ordinary human life. You, contemplating such a path, would feel the weight of this separation, the profound sense of being both revered and utterly alone. Consider the Pythia of Delphi. Chosen often as a young woman, likely a virgin, her life was immediately and irrevocably severed from her past. She could not marry, could not bear children, could not maintain the familial ties that were so central to Greek identity. Her home became the temple, her family the other priestesses and priests, but even within this sacred community, her role as the god's vessel set her apart. She was an object of veneration, a mouthpiece for Apollo, but her individual humanity was largely erased. Her thoughts, her desires, her very identity were subsumed by her sacred office. The constant physical and psychological toll of the trances, the disorientation, the exhaustion, left her drained and often disoriented. Her strange life was a relentless cycle of purification, trance, and recovery, with little room for personal joy or self-expression. Similarly, the priestesses of Dodona, the Selwa, lived a life of deliberate austerity, sleeping on the ground and never washing their feet, a practice meant to keep them intimately connected to the earth. While perhaps less dramatically intense than the Pythia's trances, their isolation was profound, living in a remote mountainous region, their days governed by the whispers of the sacred oak. They sacrificed worldly comforts, personal adornment, and social interaction for their sacred duty. Their strange life was a quiet, continuous act of renunciation, a profound dedication to a primeval connection with Zeus through nature. The high priests of major cults, such as the Hierophant of the Eleusinian Mysteries, also faced immense personal burdens. They were bound by strict rules of purity, often celibacy, and an absolute oath of secrecy. Their lives were dedicated to the meticulous preservation and performance of ancient, esoteric rituals. The knowledge they possessed, the profound truths they witnessed, could not be shared with outsiders, creating a unique form of intellectual and spiritual isolation. They were revered figures, but their personal lives were sacrificed for the sake of the sacred, their individuality submerged beneath the weight of their profound office. Even priests who were married and had families, such as many priests of Zeus or Asclepius, still experienced a significant degree of separation. Their public role demanded impeccable moral conduct, constant ritual purity, and a deep knowledge of sacred law. Their homes were often near the temple, their lives intertwined with its daily rhythms. Their personal choices were constantly scrutinized, their reputation crucial to the sanctity of their office. They might have families, but their primary allegiance, their deepest commitment, was to the God they served. This created a tension, a constant balancing act between familial duties and divine obligations, a subtle but pervasive form of personal sacrifice. The emotional burden was immense. Priests and oracles were constantly exposed to human desperation, fear, and suffering. They heard the most profound anxieties of individuals and the gravest concerns of city-states. They bore the weight of expectations, the terror of misinterpretation, and the fear of divine displeasure. For the oracle of Trophonius, the priests witnessed the raw, psychological trauma of supplicants emerging from the chasm, often shattered and forever changed. Their strange lives involved a constant engagement with the darkest aspects of human fear and the most profound expressions of existential dread. The loss of personal identity was a recurring theme. The individual, once chosen, became an instrument, a vessel, a symbol. Their former name might be forgotten, replaced by their title. Their personal aspirations gave way to divine will. This self-annihilation, though revered as a mark of piety, was a profound personal sacrifice, a constant act of surrendering one's own being for the sake of the divine. You, observing these figures, would feel the pathos of this sacrifice, the quiet tragedy of a life lived entirely for others, for the gods. The resolution for many, despite the profound burdens, lay in their unwavering faith and a deep sense of purpose. They believed implicitly in the gods they served, in the importance of their rituals, and in the profound significance of their role in mediating between the mortal and immortal realms. This conviction, coupled with the immense respect and honor they received from their communities, provided a sense of meaning and justification for their sacrifices. Their strange lives, though isolated and demanding, were also imbued with a profound spiritual richness, a constant connection to the divine that transcended the ordinary. You, reflecting on the lives of these priests and oracles, would recognize the profound human cost of such spiritual dedication. Their existence was a testament to the power of belief, the demands of the divine, and the enduring human capacity for sacrifice in the pursuit of meaning. The isolation, the renunciation, the constant emotional and psychological toll, these were the unseen burdens beneath the robes of authority and the aura of sanctity. Their strange life was a profound paradox, revered yet profoundly lonely, powerful yet personally powerless, a bridge between worlds, built on the foundation of their own personal sacrifice. At the heart of ancient Greek religion, underpinning the pronouncements of oracles and the daily duties of priests, lay the visceral, often gruesome, ritual of sacrifice. This was not merely an offering, it was the most fundamental act of communication with the gods, a solemn contract sealed with blood, smoke, and shared meat. The priests were the indispensable orchestrators of these rites, their lives intimately bound to the mechanics of life and death, the precise choreography of appeasement and communion. You, witnessing a major public sacrifice, would feel the raw power of collective belief, the tension of a community seeking divine favor, and the profound significance of the shedding of blood. The purpose of sacrifice was multifaceted: to honor the gods, to thank them for blessings, to atone for sins, to seek their favor for future endeavors, or to divine their will through omens. The type of animal sacrificed varied depending on the deity, the occasion, and the wealth of the supplicant, from a simple cock for Asclepius to a magnificent bull for Zeus or Poseidon. The process was meticulously ritualized, every step imbued with sacred meaning, a testament to the Greeks' belief in the precise nature of their contract with the divine. The ceremony would often begin with a solemn procession, *pompa*. The chosen animal, often adorned with garlands and ribbons, would be led to the altar, accompanied by priests, musicians playing flutes, and a crowd of citizens. The atmosphere would be one of hushed reverence, mixed with anticipation. The priest, typically wearing a special robe, would sprinkle sacred barley grains on the altar and on the animal's head, a symbolic act of dedication. Prayers would be offered, invoking the specific deity, outlining the purpose of the sacrifice, and seeking divine acceptance. You, standing among the onlookers, would feel the collective breath held, the shared prayer rising to the heavens. Then came the moment of blood. The priest, or a designated theites, would strike the animal, usually on the head, often with an axe or club, stunning it before its throat was cut. The gushing blood, a profound symbol of life force, would be collected in a bowl and sometimes poured over the altar, a direct libation to the god. The animal's death was not meant to be cruel, but swift and efficient, a sacred act rather than a slaughter. For the priest, this was a constant engagement with death, a necessary act to bridge the gap between mortals and immortals. His hands, though performing a violent act, were considered pure, instruments of divine will. Following the killing, the animal's entrails, particularly the liver, would be meticulously inspected for omens. This was the practice of haruspicy, a specialized skill often practiced by specific priests or seers. The shape, color, and condition of the organs could reveal the god's acceptance of the offering, or indicate displeasure, warning of future misfortunes. Imagine the tension as the priest examines the steaming entrails, his face grave, the fate of the supplicant or the city-state potentially hanging on his interpretation. This was a moment of profound anxiety, a direct glimpse into the perceived will of the gods. The choicest parts of the animal, the thigh bones wrapped in fat, and sometimes other select organs, would then be burned on the altar, rising as smoke towards the heavens, the coma or thymiama, the god's portion. The smell of burning fat and meat, mingling with incense, would fill the air, a potent sensory experience of divine communion. The remaining meat would be butchered and distributed among the participants, to be consumed in a communal feast. This shared meal was a vital aspect of the ritual, reinforcing social bonds and symbolizing the community's shared communion with the deity. It was a tangible manifestation of the divine contract. Humanity offered its best, and in return the gods granted their favor. The role of the priest in all this was paramount. He was the expert, the guide, the one who knew the exact prayers, the precise cuts, the subtle omens. His life was a constant study of these intricate rites, a dedication to ensuring that every sacrifice was performed flawlessly, lest the gods be angered. The fear of divine displeasure, of miasma, pollution, resulting from an improperly performed ritual, was a powerful motivator. A priest's mistake could bring disaster upon the entire community. This placed an immense burden of responsibility on their shoulders, making their lives a constant, meticulous performance of sacred duty. The conflict for a priest might arise from the sheer brutality of the act, especially if they were sensitive individuals. To repeatedly take life, even in a sacred context, could be emotionally challenging. Yet, their faith and their understanding of the ritual's profound significance allowed them to transcend this, viewing it as a necessary and holy act. The resolution was found in the belief that through sacrifice, life was affirmed, the divine order maintained, and humanity's place within that order secured. You, leaving a sacrifice, would carry with you the lingering scent of smoke and blood, the echoes of prayers, and a profound sense of the god's presence. The rituals of sacrifice, meticulously orchestrated by the priests, were not just ancient customs. They were the very language of ancient Greek religion, a powerful visceral testament to the deep-seated belief in a divine contract, a constant, dramatic reminder that the gods demanded their due, and in return, offered their protection and their favor. The strange life of the priest, steeped in blood and belief, was one of unwavering dedication to maintaining this sacred pact, ensuring the continued well-being of their community through the ancient, powerful language of sacrifice. For centuries, the voices of the oracles had shaped the destiny of Greece, their pronouncements echoing through the marble halls of Delphi and the rustling leaves of Dodona. But as the Hellenic world began its slow, inexorable march towards Roman dominance and eventually the rise of a new monotheistic faith, the light of the oracles began to dim. Their decline was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual fading, a poignant, often painful process that profoundly impacted the lives of the priests and oracles who clung to the ancient traditions. You, observing this shift, would feel the melancholy of an era drawing to a close, the slow erosion of a spiritual bedrock that had once seemed eternal. The first major blow came with the Roman conquest of Greece in the 2nd century BCE. While the Romans initially showed respect for Greek religious institutions, even consulting Delphi themselves, their pragmatic approach to governance and their own diverse pantheon gradually overshadowed the unique authority of the Greek oracles. Roman imperial power, not divine pronouncements from a distant chasm, increasingly dictated the political landscape. The vast political influence that Delphi once wielded, guiding colonization and mediating interstate conflicts, waned significantly as Greece became a province within a vast empire. For the high priests of Delphi, this shift meant a loss of prestige, a reduction in their political clout, and a struggle to maintain the oracle's relevance in a new world order. Economic factors also played a role. The continuous warfare among Greek city-states and later the Roman subjugation led to periods of instability and economic decline. The lavish offerings and grand treasuries that once adorned Delphi and other sanctuaries became scarcer. Maintaining the costly infrastructure of these vast religious complexes became a challenge. Priests and temple staff found their resources dwindling, their ability to sustain the grandeur of their cults increasingly difficult. Their strange lives, once supported by the immense wealth of the faithful, now faced the harsh realities of economic austerity, forcing them to adapt or watch their sacred institutions crumble. The rise of philosophical skepticism, which had begun centuries earlier, continued to chip away at the unquestioning faith in oracles. Rational inquiry and the growing emphasis on human reason, championed by schools like the Stoics and Epicureans, offered alternative frameworks for understanding the world and guiding human conduct. While these philosophies did not necessarily outright reject the gods, they often de-emphasized the need for direct divine intervention or ambiguous prophecies. For the priests, this meant a shrinking intellectual audience, a growing segment of society that sought answers not from the Pythia, but from the reasoned arguments of philosophers. Then came the profound, transformative challenge of Christianity. Beginning in the 1st century CE and gaining momentum over the next few centuries, Christianity offered a radically different worldview. A single, omnipotent God, a clear moral code, and a promise of salvation that superseded the often ambiguous guidance of polytheistic oracles. The Christian message directly contradicted the polytheistic framework upon which the oracles depended, viewing pagan gods as demons or false idols. As Christianity spread, especially after Emperor Constantine's conversion in the 4th century CE, the official support for pagan cults dwindled, and in many cases, outright persecution began. Imperial decrees increasingly targeted pagan temples and practices. Temples were closed, statues destroyed, and cult property confiscated. The life of a pagan priest or oracle became not just one of diminishing influence, but of active danger. They faced the threat of violence, legal prosecution, and the systematic dismantling of their cherished traditions. Imagine a priest who had dedicated his entire life to the service of Apollo, watching helplessly as his temple was defaced, its rituals forbidden, its sacred fire extinguished. The despair, the sense of utter desolation would have been immense. Their strange lives, once revered, were now deemed heretical, their very existence a threat to the new religious order. The oracles themselves gradually fell silent. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century CE, lamented the cessation of oracles, noting that many once active sites were now silent, attributing it to a decline in the earth's prophetic exhalations or the departure of divine spirits. While some attributed this to natural causes, the broader context of waning faith and political pressure cannot be ignored. The Pythia at Delphi, for instance, continued to give prophecies into the 4th century CE, but her pronouncements became increasingly rare, her influence a shadow of its former glory. Even as the last sacred fires flickered and the final oracular whispers faded into the silence of history, the legacy of ancient Greek priests and oracles endured. Their strange lives, dedicated to bridging the mortal and divine, left an indelible mark on Western thought, literature, and the enduring human quest for meaning and foresight. The institutions themselves may have crumbled, but the profound need they addressed, to understand fate, to seek guidance, to connect with something beyond the mundane, continued to resonate, echoing through subsequent eras. You, contemplating their lasting impact, would recognize the timeless human yearning that these ancient figures once sought to satisfy. The most obvious legacy lies in the realm of literature and drama. The Delphic oracle, in particular, became a powerful narrative device, shaping the plots of countless Greek tragedies. Oedipus's tragic fate, foretold by Apollo, is perhaps the most famous example, illustrating the terrifying power of prophecy and the futility of trying to escape one's destiny. The ambiguous nature of oracular pronouncements, and the often disastrous consequences of misinterpretation, provided rich dramatic tension. These stories, read and performed for millennia, kept the memory of the oracles alive, embedding their power and their ambiguity deep within the cultural consciousness. Even if the oracle was silent, its literary echo remained deafening. Philosophical thought, too, grappled with the concepts of fate, free will, and divine knowledge, themes central to the oracular experience. While some philosophers challenged the oracles, others sought to understand the nature of inspiration and intuition. Socrates' famous encounter with the Delphic oracle, which declared him the wisest man, profoundly shaped his philosophical mission of self-examination. The very act of questioning, of seeking truth through dialectic, was, in a sense, a philosophical form of oracle consultation, a quest for inner wisdom. The strange lives of the priests and oracles provided the raw material for centuries of intellectual debate, prompting fundamental questions about human agency and divine omnipotence. The idea of a sacred space, a nexus where the divine and mortal realms meet, also carried forward. While the specific Greek sanctuaries fell into ruin, the concept of pilgrimage to holy sites, of seeking spiritual solace in places imbued with sacred energy, persisted in other religious traditions. The Eleusinian mysteries, with their promise of a blessed afterlife and profound spiritual transformation, prefigured later mystical traditions and the enduring human desire for transcendence beyond death. The strange lives of the Hierophants and other mystery priests, dedicated to revealing esoteric truths, laid a foundation for later secret societies and spiritual paths. The psychological impact of the oracles also left its mark. The human need for guidance, especially in times of uncertainty, is universal. Even without a living oracle, people continued to seek signs, omens, and forms of divination. The concept of listening to one's inner voice, or following one's intuition, can be seen as a secularized echo of the ancient practice of seeking divine guidance. The strange lives of those who channeled the gods highlighted this fundamental human vulnerability, this constant search for external validation or internal clarity in a chaotic world. Even the architecture of the oracular sites, particularly Delphi's grandeur, inspired later generations. The concept of a monumental religious center, drawing pilgrims from far and wide, influenced the design of later sacred complexes. The very ruins of Delphi, Dodona, and Didyma continued to inspire awe and reflection, serving as tangible reminders of a profound spiritual past. The strange lives of the temple attendants who meticulously maintained these spaces contributed to the enduring aesthetic and spiritual power of these sites, even in their decay. The decline of the oracles was not merely the end of a religious institution, it was a profound cultural shift. Yet, the questions they addressed, the anxieties they assuaged, and the spiritual yearning they tapped into remain timeless. The strange lives of the priests and oracles, with their unique blend of dedication, sacrifice, and connection to the divine, became a testament to humanity's enduring quest for meaning in a vast and often terrifying universe. You, reflecting on this legacy, would understand that the voices of the oracles, though long silent, continue to whisper through the pages of history, the plots of tragedies, and the philosophical debates that still echo today. They remind us of our enduring need for guidance, our fascination with the unknown, and our relentless search for purpose. The strange life of these ancient figures, dedicated to listening for the gods, ultimately served to illuminate the deepest, most enduring aspects of the human spirit, a testament to our perennial struggle to understand our place in the cosmic order, forever seeking the meaning that once flowed from the mouth of the earth or the rustling of a sacred oak. Their influence, though unseen, remains a powerful undercurrent in the river of human consciousness, a haunting reminder of the time when the gods spoke, and mortals listened with bated breath. To truly comprehend the strange life of an oracle, one must attempt to peer into their inner world, to imagine the profound, often terrifying, psychological experience of channeling the divine. This was not merely a performance, it was an altered state of consciousness, a blurring of the self and the divine, a constant dance on the precipice of sanity. You, trying to grasp this experience, would feel the dizzying disorientation, the overwhelming sensory input, and the immense mental fortitude required to survive such a calling. For the Pythia, the process began with the sacred vapors rising from the chasm, mingled with the intoxicating scent of laurel. As she inhaled, a profound physiological and psychological shift would occur. Her body would become rigid, then begin to convulse. Her eyes, once focused on the mundane, would roll back, revealing only white, a terrifying sight for supplicants. This was not a controlled act, but a complete surrender, a loss of conscious control. You can almost feel the rush, the sudden onset of a dissociative state, where the boundaries of self dissolve. Within this altered state, the inner world of the Pythia would be a maelstrom of sensory input. Visions, often symbolic and fragmented, would flood her mind. She might see images of battles, ships, harvests, or mythical figures, all imbued with a heightened, almost hyperreal intensity. Sounds would become distorted, perhaps the roar of a distant sea, the clash of swords, or the whisper of unseen voices. These were not mere hallucinations. They were perceived as direct communications from Apollo, unfiltered and overwhelming. The challenge was not just to receive them, but to survive their intensity, to not be utterly shattered by the sheer force of divine information. The words that tore from her throat were often incoherent, a jumble of guttural sounds, poetic fragments, and seemingly nonsensical phrases. This was the raw, unmediated voice of the god, too vast and complex for mortal language to fully articulate. For the Pythia, the struggle was to give voice to the ineffable, to translate the divine chaos into something, anything that could be interpreted. It was a terrifying linguistic battle, a desperate attempt to grasp at meaning within a torrent of sacred madness. The exhaustion that followed was profound, a total depletion of physical and mental energy, as if her very soul had been stretched to its breaking point and then slowly reassembled. The priests of Trophonius faced a different, yet equally harrowing inner experience. Their descent into the chasm, the absolute darkness, the feeling of being dragged by unseen forces, induced a state of extreme sensory deprivation and psychological terror. The prophecy here was often not a vision or a voice, but a direct, visceral confrontation with the supplicant's deepest fears and anxieties, delivered through a profound, unsettling silence or a terrifying psychological pressure. For the priests guiding these individuals, understanding this inner world was crucial, as they had to interpret the raw, often inarticulate trauma that emerged. Their own lives, though not directly experiencing the trance, were deeply marked by their constant exposure to this extreme human fear and psychological distress. Even in the more subtle oracles like Dodona, the priestesses had to cultivate an inner world of profound intuition and sensitivity. They had to tune their minds to the subtle whispers of the sacred oak, to discern patterns in the rustling leaves and the cooing of doves. This required a heightened state of awareness, a deep connection to the natural world, and an ability to interpret symbolic language. Their inner world was one of constant attentiveness, a spiritual receptivity that transcended ordinary perception. The weight of truth itself was a profound burden. To be privy to the fate of kings, the destiny of cities, the hidden anxieties of individuals, this knowledge could be overwhelming. Oracles often knew of impending disasters, of personal tragedies, of unavoidable fates, but were bound to deliver these truths in cryptic ways, or perhaps even forbidden from directly intervening. This created a profound sense of helplessness, a constant awareness of the fragility of human life and the predetermined nature of some events. Their strange lives were marked by this constant tension between knowing and being unable to fully alter the course of destiny. The isolation of the oracle also contributed to their unique inner world. Set apart from ordinary society, Their experiences were often beyond the comprehension of others. Who could truly understand the terrifying beauty of a divine trance, the profound wisdom gleaned from a sacred oak, or the psychological trauma of a chthonic descent? This made their inner world a solitary one, a realm of unique spiritual insight that could not be fully shared, contributing to their profound sense of separation. The resolution for these seers often lay in their unwavering faith and the profound sense of purpose derived from their calling. Despite the personal cost, they believed in the gods they served and the vital importance of their role. Their strange lives, though fraught with psychological challenges, were also imbued with a profound spiritual richness, a constant, direct connection to the divine that transcended the ordinary human experience. They were the living bridges, the fragile conduits, through whom the gods spoke, their inner worlds a testament to the immense power and often terrifying beauty of divine communication. You, imagining the inner world of a seer, would feel a profound sense of awe, pity, and a chilling understanding of the human capacity for both spiritual transcendence and psychological torment. The visions, the voices, the overwhelming sensory input, and the crushing weight of truth, these were the unseen burdens that shaped the strange, extraordinary lives of those who dared to speak for the gods, forever navigating the terrifying, beautiful landscape where mortal mind met divine will. The last priestess, her face a tapestry of ancient wrinkles, her eyes holding the quiet wisdom of countless sunsets, sat not on a grand tripod in a bustling temple, but on a simple stone bench overlooking the desolate ruins of what was once a vibrant sanctuary. The sacred spring, once bubbling with prophetic power, was now a trickle. The offerings were few, the supplicants fewer still, their faces etched with a different kind of desperation, a yearning not for specific answers, but for the comforting echo of a forgotten faith. The world had moved on, embracing new gods, new philosophies, new ways of understanding the universe. Yet, here she remained, a solitary sentinel guarding the flickering embers of an ancient tradition, her strange life a living testament to an enduring human mystery. She had witnessed the slow, agonizing decline. She remembered the stories of her predecessors, of the Pythia's power, of Dodona's whispers, of Eleusis' profound secrets. She had seen the grand temples crumble, not in a single catastrophic blow, but through the insidious erosion of neglect, the slow retreat of belief. The laughter of pilgrims had been replaced by the sighing wind, the chanting of priests by the chirping of cicadas. Her own voice, once trained to interpret subtle omens, now mostly spoke to the silence, to the ghosts of a bygone era. You, standing before her, would feel the profound weight of history, the melancholy beauty of a tradition on the verge of vanishing, and the quiet, unwavering strength of a soul dedicated to a fading light. Yet even in this twilight of the gods, the fundamental human need that had birthed the oracles remained. The fear of the unknown, the craving for certainty, the desperate hope for meaning in a chaotic world. These were not extinguished by the rise of new empires or new religions. They simply found new avenues of expression, new prophets, new sacred texts. The priestess understood this. Her strange life, seemingly obsolete, was in fact a living embodiment of this perennial human quest. She saw in the few remaining supplicants the same anxieties that had driven kings to Delphi, the same personal struggles that had led farmers to Dodona. The questions were timeless, even if the answers had become elusive. Her final prophecy, if it could be called that, was not a cryptic riddle about war or harvest. It was a silent, profound understanding of the human heart itself. She knew that humanity, for all its progress, would forever grapple with its mortality, its place in the cosmos, its longing for connection to something greater than itself. The gods might change, the rituals might evolve, but the search for divine guidance, for a bridge between the seen and the unseen, would always persist. Her strange life, a relic of a forgotten age, served as a poignant reminder that the impulse to seek meaning, to find solace in the sacred, was woven into the very fabric of human existence. She closed her eyes, not in a trance induced by vapors or sacred waters, but in a meditative repose born of years of quiet contemplation. She felt the earth beneath her, the sun on her skin, the wind in her hair, the same elemental forces that had spoken to the ancient priestesses of Dodona. She remembered the stories, the hymns, the whispered wisdom passed down through generations. She felt, not the overwhelming presence of a single god, but the pervasive, subtle hum of the sacred in all things, the enduring mystery that lay at the heart of existence. Her strange life was a bridge, not just between the mortal and the divine, but between the past and the present, a living link to a world where the gods walked closer, where their voices were heard in the rustling leaves and the chasm's breath. As she opened her eyes, a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. She had no grand pronouncements to offer, no empires to guide. Her final prophecy was simply this: that the human heart, in its endless search for answers, would always in some form seek its own oracle, its own connection to the divine, its own way to navigate the terrifying beauty of existence. You, leaving this last priestess, would carry with you not a specific answer, but a profound understanding of an enduring truth. The strange life of priests and oracles in ancient Greece was not just a chapter in history, it was a testament to the timeless human need for meaning, for guidance, for a bridge to the unknown. The echoes of their voices, the weight of their sacrifices, and the profound wisdom of their unique existence would forever remind us that the human spirit, in its deepest essence, is forever seeking, forever questioning, forever yearning for the whispers of the divine, a mystery as old and as enduring as humanity itself. The silence was not an end, but a transformation, a quiet affirmation that the sacred, in its myriad forms, would always find a way to speak, and the human heart, in its eternal quest, would always find a way to listen.